Hello everyone, AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink, and the other night I sat down and did some watercoloring. I've had this pretty pink Posh Wild Rose stamp set for some time now, and I've been just wanting to color in these images. They're so pretty. So I decided to use all of the images in the set, and I lined them up onto my stamp platform. And I was using Canson XL watercolor paper, and I'm inking up the images with VersaFine ONYX black ink, and I'm stamping onto the textured side of this watercolor paper. So this helps, having the platform or a MISTI, any sort of stamp positioner just helps, so I can re-stamp these multiple times. I think with all of them I ended up stamping them twice to get a perfect image, because this watercolor paper, it's slightly textured. It's not too bad. Sometimes it just kind of depends on the images, but I stamped it twice, and while I had everything out, I ended up doing a second piece, because after, I go to the effort of lining up all the stamps, etc., I was like, why not? I might as well get double the images out of it. Plus, I was thinking I'd probably make more than one card. So that's what I ended up doing. So for all of the actual coloring, I'm using my Mijello Mission Gold watercolors, and not a whole lot of rhyme or reason to this. This was literally later in the evening. I had The Office playing on Netflix. I'm kind of obsessed with that show. I can't believe, here's me this is how many years behind I am with just everything in life. So I had that playing, and I was just sitting and adding color. So I kind of was experimenting with layers, and yet at the same time, I'm just not paying enough attention really to do anything too fancy. But I decided one set of the flowers I was going to do in really bright pink, and the other set I was going to do in purple. So I started with just kind of a light wash of color, and then I would just keep adding pigment and really deepening the color here. So, and then as I started adding the darker color, I kind of was liking the slightly splotchy effect I was getting. So I went with that. And I'm doing the same thing with the leaves. I started with just a really light wash of a light green, and then just kept adding pigment to deepen it, and then would add kind of messy, splotchy effects. And then as I got closer to the darkest pigment, I'm really adding that, almost just dotting the brush to get this sort of effect. And for the most part, this was me just kind of experimenting. I wasn't super pleased with it at this point, but I wanted to keep going because I've learned from experience that more often than not, even if I'm not happy with whatever it is I'm coloring, whatever medium, whether it be watercolor or markers or whatever, more often than not, if I at least completely get to the very end, and even if I have to walk away from it for a day, which with these I did, more so because it was late at night, but more so if I come back to it later, my opinion of it has changed. So I was like, oh, I don't know if I like these. They're just eh. But I would add the splotchy, but then I would kind of clean off my brush a bit and add a bit of water to soften it. And then I decided I really wanted to add some shimmer. So I'm using my Finetec palette here. Although honestly, this is the pearlescent colors, and I love this palette. I've said this before with these palettes. I love them. They're very pricey. You could get a very similar effect by just using some Perfect Pearls powder mixed with water. That would work fabulously. I do have the Prima Metallic Accents palette. That's a really nice palette. It is extremely affordable. I think the Prima one is $15 or less, whereas these Finetec ones are quite pricey. But I have a thing. I like all the watercolors. I want to own them all, and I want all the shimmer watercolors. It's just one of my many collections. Anyway. I added the shimmer to this, and it was reactivating, of course, these heavier pigments, because I went pretty dark with these watercolors, the purple especially. So it did reactivate it a bit, but that's okay. I would just wipe off my brush if I felt the need to, and I just added the shimmer kind of similarly, just kind of dabbing it on. So I added it to all the flowers, and then I added it to the leaves as well. And as this dried, though, it did obscure the lines of the images somewhat. Not a lot, but enough that I didn't quite like that. And again, if I had been thinking, but by this point I had already removed the stamps from my stamp platform. But what I would suggest you do is leave the stamps in your stamp platform. Then you could put this piece right back in and just re-stamp it, and you would have all the definition. but I didn't think about that. So I went in with my Pilot Envelope Addressing Pen, because this pen is super, super black. I love this pen. Sometimes it's almost too black for stamped lines, like to fill it out, but with this, it was perfect. I didn't outline every single part of every single image. I just went along and added back in the center details, because those were definitely obscured, and then would go over any of the lines that were obscured by that shimmery watercolor, just to bring back that line definition. But like I said, this would have been so much easier to just stick it back in the stamp platform, ink up the stamps with the VersaFine, and stamp right over. Or even if you wanted to go that really extra route, is you could line it up in your platform, ink it up, stamp it, and heat emboss that with either black embossing powder or a clear, or even something shimmery if you wanted. You know, that's totally a much less time-consuming option. This didn't take me too long, but it did take a bit, because yeah, I went in on all those leaves, because the leaves were definitely obscured the lines. So I just went along, and I wasn't even perfect with my outlining either, but I just really liked how much better it looked by adding back in all of that detail. And if you wanted to get fancy, you could, you know, kind of draw in your own details and whatnot with things like this. I haven't yet got to that point, but I've seen other, you know, card makers do that sort of thing, and it's just, it gives it something else. But I just stuck to the lines, and then after I was done all of that, I have the coordinating die set here, and I'm just going to tape all of these dies in place with just little bits of washi tape so that none of this moves when I run it through my die cut machine. So I make sure I've got everything lined up, and then I can cut all of these in one pass. So I did that with both the purple and the pink set, and then I set those aside. And then I have this shimmer spray that I'd created in a previous video a couple plus months ago, I'm not sure. It's just a bottle, a Nouveau spray bottle that I put water in, and then I had added some of the Nouveau Platinum embellishment mousse. And you always have to shake it up really well because it does settle. So this creates a very subtle shimmer. I really like it because it gives it that little something, but it's not glittery or super sparkly. So I sprayed these pieces of, this is some distressed watercolor paper, and I chose this because it's more white and it's a little bit thinner than the Canson. So I sprayed it really well with the shimmer spray to give it that little bit of shimmer. And then I'm putting both these pieces in these embossing folders that came in the Simon Says February card kit. And these are both Tim Holtz embossing folders, and they're just fabulous. So I used one for each, and I have my platform set up in my Big Shot here, open to tab 1, and then you put a cutting plate, and then the embossing folder with the paper in it, and then another cutting plate, and run it through. Different machines have different instructions on embossing folders. This is the one I use for my Big Shot. So this embosses both of these fabulously. And because they've been sprayed, it softens up that cardstock. So it just embosses beautifully. So those, again, set aside because they needed to dry. And then I am running some scraps of black cardstock through my my Xyron sticker maker here, the wider one. You could also use the 3-inch insert in the Creative Station Light machine. I just happen to still have this on hand, so I just pulled it out. But ran that up through so that all of these pieces of black cardstock have adhesive on one side. I had already lined all up my dies, so I'm not just like wasting cardstock or anything. Although when it comes to like black cardstock or white cardstock, having extra pieces with adhesive on the back of them, I would just store them with my black cardstock because this is what I use most of the time to die cut sentiments. So I ran those through, and then I'm going to just trim these down because I'm going to use my little Sidekick machine to die cut all these. You don't need a Sidekick machine. I do genuinely love mine for smaller die cuts, especially when I have to do multiples, because I'm going to run these dies through 3 times each. So when I have to do multiple dies multiple times and they're small enough to fit in my Sidekick, I just like the fact that I don't have to, fiddle with my bigger machine. But with these cards, I'm definitely being extra, and I'm literally using like everything. Every type of adhesive, every die cut machine, everything. It's nuts, but I was having fun and just creating and going very extra with these. So all of these pieces of black cardstock with the adhesive on the back, I'm running through the Sidekick with 2 different pretty pink Posh sentiment dies. I have the Hello Friend script and the Thank You script, and I just love them. So all of them, each script die, I'm running through 3 times. So I'm going to have 3 layers of black cardstock so I can stack these together and get that nice dimensional sentiment that I just love. So I am, again though, I'm really loving the Sidekick, and it cuts really nicely. Like, I don't have to cut more than once with these. Like, it cuts through the adhesive and the cardstock, no problem. So I leave my first layer in the cardstock, and that just holds everything in place. I've shown this in a lot of videos. I just like this so I don't have to fiddle as much. It's easier to just adhere the other 2 layers on top of that, and then once it's done, I will pop it out of this bottom piece. So I'm just going to peel this off. It's got the adhesive on the back of it, and then I'm going to line it up over the bottom layer, and then I'll do that another time. And with the Xyron adhesive, you have a lot of wiggle room until you really press things down. You can easily kind of peel things up and fiddle. That's another reason why I like using it. And I don't have to worry too much. So especially with sentiments like this that are very finicky, as I like to call them, I can easily just adhere everything into place. And then you can see I can just pop that out of the release paper and it's good to go. So again, going to set those aside so I can start actually getting this card put together. These pieces that I had embossed, because it was the distress watercolor paper, those were 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. So I wanted to trim these down to just slightly smaller than my card bases, which will be 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. And plus, the embossing folders don't emboss all the way past the edges. So I just trimmed a little bit off each side of these so that they were trimmed down to 5 inches by 4 inches, or 5 1/4 inches by 4 inches. So just each side I would trim off just a little bit, and then I would line up the final edge to make sure it was down to 4 inches by 5 1/4. And then I'm going to add my score tape adhesive. Again, I'm being extra. This was not necessary. I could have just used like my Nouveau adhesive. Any sort of adhesive really is going to work. I could have used my Xyron Mega Runner, anything like that. But I have this big roll of score tape, and it's the 2.5 inch wide. So 2 pieces covers the entire back of this, and this isn't going anywhere. Like, nowhere. It's not going to budge. And I do like it for anything like this that is very, like, it's been embossed, so it's very dimensional. So this will cover everything, is super, super strong, and I don't have to press down hard and, like, ruin any of that embossing. So, like I said, I'm using everything. I'm just pulling out everything in my studio to make these cards. So I completely coated the back of those, and then I can just peel off this backing here and adhere this first piece to my card base, which, like I said, is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 of heavyweight white cardstock. So I'm going to adhere that. And then on the other card front, I just laid out the flowers and the leaves. You know, I had fiddled off camera just to figure out how I wanted these to, you know, go on my card. So I used that as my guide so that I could adhere everything on the second card, making it a whole lot easier. So the purple flowers and leaves, I'm going to, I added foam tape to the back of all of them. And now I can just quickly pop them into place because I've got my visual guide here with the pink ones on the left. So I can get everything into place. And then after I've popped all these into place with foam tape, I can then take the pink flowers and leaves and add foam tape to those and adhere those into place super quick and easy, because just doing one at a time like this made things go a lot faster. So I've got that one laid out, and then now I can peel out my sentiment here from that backing paper and remove all the little bits and pieces that just wanted to stick to everything because everything's got adhesive on the back of it. So once I've got these popped out, I can kind of lay them out on my card and figure out where I want to place these. I've got, like I said, I've got that wiggle room. Nothing is permanently adhered until I really press it down. So once I've got the sentiment where I want it, I can really press it down, and then I'm going to move that U a little bit before really pressing it down and firmly adhering it to my card front. So I'm going to get this one completely adhered, and once I'm happy with that, now I can go finish the pink card. So same thing, I'm going to peel off the backing from that embossed piece of cardstock, adhere that into place, and then pop foam tape on the back of all of those flowers and leaves, and just do the same layout as I did with the purple card. And then same thing, I'm going to peel off the backing from the sentiment and adhere it into place. And it was at this point, or right after I adhered this, that in some way, I lost the dot to the eye. I had stacked it, I had everything to go, and popped out of the backing when I went to like pull it out. It popped off and it's so small. I completely lost it. I tried for I don't know how long to find it, of course, because I didn't want to re-die cut everything. And then I just gave up. I was like, I'm not doing this. So I wanted to add some jewels anyway. So I have some Studio Caudia Onyx jewels here, and I just picked one out, and I'm going to adhere that into place for the dot for the eye, and it's good to go. I'm not going to worry about it anymore. So I adhered that into place, and then I adhered some of the silver foil ones and the black ones. I was pretty heavy-handed with the jewels. I adhered them all over these cards because I was going all out with the shimmer and the sparkle and everything. This was, I guess, me making up for the fact that the embossed backgrounds aren't super sparkly. I don't know. I added tons anyway, and I adhered them all in place with my multi-medium matte adhesive. So I adhered them to the centers of the flowers, and then I scattered them on the backgrounds. Just fun. So to finish off the cards, of course, I needed to stamp sentiments on the inside. So I'm using the Thoughtful Greetings stamp set from Pretty Pink Posh. I love this set. It has such wonderful sentiments in it, and I just love it. So for the Hello Friend stamp set, and I've got these lined up, I'm just lining them up in my stamp positioner, and then lining up the stamp, and then inking it up with the VersaFine Onyx Black ink. So for this one, it says, everything is better when you're around. And I ended up stamping it twice to make sure I got a really black, crisp sentiment. And then I'm going to remove this card from my stamp platform and the sentiment. And then I'm going to line up another sentiment from the same set. Since this one is a thank you card, I chose a different sentiment from the set and lined that up. Same thing, lined it up, inked it up with the VersaFine Onyx Black ink, and then stamped that. And it says, I will always remember your kindness. And that finished off my cards. So as always, I will have links below the video to my blog post. I'll have links to all the supplies used, all the photos, etc. So check that out below if you are interested. Thank you all so much for watching and subscribing and thumbs upping and commenting on my videos. I appreciate your support so very much. And I am sure I will see you all very soon in another video. Bye!